Hi, and welcome to The Curling Show, the podcast that brings you interviews with the sport's top athletes and the people who shape the game. Brought to you by Fit to Curl, a sports-specific guide to training for the world's greatest game. By, and this sounds pretty great, Olympic gold medalist John Morris. This 42-year-old front-end player helped out a bit too. Get a copy now so you can start getting fit and be ready to train hard when this curling season ends. If you saw the dominant performance of John and his Canadian teammates at the Olympics, you saw what a different fitness makes in high-performance curling. But no matter what your current level of fitness might be or what kind of curler you are, there's a program in Fit to Curl that will help you on the ice. To get your copy, visit fittocurl.com. That's fittocurl.com or a curling equipment retailer. The Chief Operating Officer of the United States Curling Association, Rick Patzke. Welcome to The Curling Show.
Thanks, Dean.
Hey, Rick. You've been on the show before. Thanks for coming back. It's been quite a few weeks, I think. Interest in the sport exploding. U.S. teams in Vancouver imploding. Even a couple of grievance hearings surrounding this week's U.S. Nationals. At the start of February, I don't imagine this is quite how you imagine this past month going.
No, we definitely had medal expectations going into the Olympics. For sure one, if not two. And the results, of course, are disappointing not only for the team, but for all of USA curling.
If you think about you're going to talk about the medal results, we'll start there quickly. Of course, the article that touched off a firestorm of sorts in U.S. curling circles was in the Wall Street Journal, written by Reed Albergotti. The headline was U.S. curling shocker, we expected to lose. I'll admit I went on a wallstreetjournal.com webcast and said that you threw the athletes under the bus. Since then, you've said in a letter to USCA member clubs that your quotes were taken out of context and had a reply to the article. And I could admit after rereading the article that I may have jumped to some conclusions quickly. But at the same time, your letter doesn't clear up everything for me, I guess. So let's start with this one from the article. You say in the article we never got on one path and that there wasn't total buy-in. I guess my question on that one that I didn't get out of your response is who are you referring to when you say there wasn't total buy-in? Was it the two teams in particular, or is it the volunteer board of the USCA?
I was referring to the two teams, and in fairness to Reed, the quotes that he used were more or less accurate. I can't say they were verbatim. I didn't tape them myself, but only out of context in the fact that what I was referring to was we've been revamping the high-performance program about 18 months now, and the two teams that won in February last year kind of came in the midst of this. So in what I told Reed was it was probably hard for the teams to completely buy into something that was so new to them and wasn't even finalized by USA Curling. They were comfortable with the systems they had in place and didn't always join in with the high-performance aspects of, for instance, the strength and conditioning and the mental skills training and aspects like that.
So it was really they didn't buy into the fitness expectations and the conditioning and high performance on that level.
Yeah, and those are just a couple in particular, Dean, but really there's a lot more to the program than that. A lot of stats analysis going on and different ways to approach different teams they would be playing. And without that comfort level of being able to say, this works, this is proven, I think that it's a tendency of people to go back to what they're comfortable with.
The article says that in return for money from the United States Olympic Committee, the USCA would be forced to change the culture and structure of the national team, and that the USCA started talking to the United States Olympic Committee and competitive athletes and coaches about this 18 months ago. Who were the competitive athletes and coaches that were in on this? So was it people from the Athletes Advisory Council of the AAC? Was it athletes from other sports?
We had a meeting with the U.S. Olympic Committee high performance staff, and I think it was October of 2007 or 8, somewhere in there. And we had two athletes from the 2006 Olympics, Sean Rajeski and Maureen Brunt. And we also had Bob Benson, coach of the 06 men's team, along with some USCA and USSC high performance. And kind of the gist of that meeting. We were laying out the plan for sustained excellence by 2014. So working backward from there, we said, well, this is kind of what we need to start our Olympic teams for 2010 on, as far as a year-long training program, conditioning, mental skills, all that sort. And I remember Sean and Maureen, when we asked them, what do you think? This is a pretty intensive schedule. And the consensus was that if we don't do something like this, our chances of medaling were nil, both in the Olympics and future World Championships.
Well, I mean, that makes sense to me, that part of it. One section of your letter that confused me here, though, is you talk about how the spending of the money was tightly controlled, so it didn't go directly to the athletes, but went to mandatory training and camps in 2009. In the same section, you talk about how the teams, coaches, and staff were all held accountable. But in that same section, you talk about how there wasn't enough money for the athletes to quit their jobs and train full time. So I guess there's a part of me that's just confused by that. Was there enough money for them to commit to training and they didn't? Was there ever a time when the funding they did receive was in jeopardy because they weren't following the program?
I think, and to provide a little perspective, Reed did not maybe understand the Olympic Committee's funding. I mean, U.S. curling's been funded by the USOC for probably, 10 years on the high performance side. And it was a little bit confusing when it was stated that we went to the USOC for money, kind of a cry for help. It wasn't really the case. We already had the money in place.
Money was already there. Yeah, it wasn't like it was new money, was it?
Correct.
Right.
And they weren't holding a hammer over us saying, well, you do this or else. It was basically getting their resources behind the program and tapping into the high performance programs that they already have in place. So the teams, there was probably 100,000 plus earmarked for each team for training for the entire year. And that's certainly not enough for somebody to quit their job and to live on, because that's basically your travel and training money and a small monthly stipend that, more or less pocket money.
So how were the teams and the coaching staffs? It says, how were they held accountable? I mean, we're sort of settled here that maybe they didn't follow the program as much as the people behind the program would have liked. But was it also a bit of a catch-22 because there was no accountability built in?
Yeah, I think we probably have to start with the culture of competitive curling as it was, or maybe currently still is, and that a skip forms a team, and they call all the shots, and they maybe bring a coach on because U.S. curling says they have to have a coach, but they still, in a sense, control the team. What we changed in the funding aspect this year was, in previous years, there was a pot of money, and teams applied for that funding, and it was based on their competitive schedule and training commitment and their resume, more or less. And they got the money directly from the U.S. Olympic Committee, and we never really knew where it was spent, how effective it was. A lot of times funded teams didn't even make the nationals. Even in the sense on the men's side, it seemed like getting funding was kind of the kiss of death.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess two last year, right? Pete Fentz and Jason Larway were funded and didn't get through the challenge round.
Correct. So how we did it this year, and I would foresee this as the plan going forward, was the money was from the U.S. Olympic Committee was given to U.S. curling, and we set up with the teams kind of parameters and said, okay, this is what it's used for, and if you're committed to these things, your travel, training, et cetera, would be funded. And both teams were very committed to the schedule. I mean, we had some rough spots initially because it was a lot more than they were used to. But what we would do is advance money to a team account so they weren't having out of pocket, plane airfare and lodging and all that. And they could draw on that, and then they would submit a detailed expense report, and we'd say, yeah, that all looks good, or, no, we're not, this wasn't in line with the program. So they had the funding. It's just a much easier way for us to say, here's what it was spent on, here's the result. Now we go back and look and see if that was the best way to use the money.
this is all one part of the discussion, but of course it naturally leads to the other. That's a hot topic in U.S. curling circuits. Is the USCA and the USOC going to push toward a selection process like Great Britain used or like China used, where we would probably pick a team next year, a team that would be put together by USCA personnel or USOC personnel, and that would be the designated national team for 2014. I guess the question is that on the table?
I think everything's on the table, Dean, and the USOC is not necessarily telling us how to select or, even fund teams. They're basically demanding results. I mean, that's what their mission is to win medals and develop sports to excellence. So everything is pretty much on the table. I don't know that the model that Great Britain uses is the best for us. I think we definitely have to change something because the system we have right now doesn't seem to be performing the best.
Well, I would agree. I think, with all due respect to John Schuster's team and Deb McCormick's team, who actually, I think Deb McCormick's team probably would have been the team that would have been picked if an All-Stars team was selected. With all due respect to John's team, even John Benton on this team said this last year, I don't think you should be able to put together a team in September and win the right to go to the Olympics in February. And lots of teams did that last year, tried that. But, I'd certainly like to see us go to, my thought is a hybrid of somewhere between what they do in Switzerland and what they do in Canada. I don't think any country can do what Canada does because we don't have the depth. But I don't think the all-star team selection model proved all that successful either, though. I mean, China and Great Britain weren't on the medal stand in the men's, and they weren't on the medal stand in the women's either, Great Britain. So I don't think the all-star selection model is a proven winner. But I certainly think narrowing the field down for who can have the right to play to go to the Olympics would make sense.
Right, and China did get on the medal stand on the women's side, and that model I definitely think would not work for us because it's not sustainable. They basically pick 10 athletes and train them, and basically that's all they do. They're professional curlers.
Well, and they were professional athletes before they were curlers, right? So we don't even have.
Correct.
For starters, we're not China.
Right, and we still, our mission includes grow the sport, and you don't grow the sport by just limiting it to the top tier. I think one of the ideas we're looking at is funding might be for individuals more than teams. Like we'll fund the program, and those that can commit to the programs and the dedication that's being asked of them would then form teams, maybe within that pool of athletes. And again, this is just a suggestion. It's not where we're going. It's not conclusion by any means. But we have to look at getting away from sort of the system of equality where everybody, including myself, could go out and form a team and hope for the best. If we're going to sustain excellence, we need to get a core group of dedicated athletes. And athletes that aren't even in curling today could be somebody that can develop in 4 or 8 years from, whatever their athletic base is to become very good curlers.
Well, I'd agree with that. I think the Olympic team process does need to be winnowed down. I do think, though, that we need to look at pre-qualifying teams to our national championships. I do think we should keep at least some path open to all to the national championships and use that as a way to help determine who can compete for the Olympics too. But I don't disagree with that. I don't think, however, that we should necessarily adopt a model that we've seen used in other countries because I haven't seen one that looks perfect. I think ours is probably going to need its own hybrid. And one thing in your letter, you did say the USCA's mission is to grow the sport and win international medals, which go hand in hand, which I think is kind of true. But I think you got the order right there, though. I don't think you can win international medals and grow the sport if we only have a team of 5 people.
I totally agree with that, too. It's, if you look at some of the other sports, skiing might be a good example. Not that many years ago, they were bottom feeders. The Austrians ruled everything and really had no worries about USA. They made some major changes in their organizational structure and how athletes trained and were committed, to the national team aspect. I got to believe that USA curling members and actually our whole country, from the letters they received during the Olympics, would be a lot happier if their teams representing them and the country were in contention. And that, in turn, will help grow the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been better if our teams were in the mix in Vancouver, that's for sure. But at the same time, like you noted, there were also a number of people showed up at our club's open house who really think they have a legitimate shot at 2014 based on those results. So I made a lot of bets that they wouldn't be there with those people, by the way. But
I fielded a lot of similar calls and letters, and turning lemons into lemonade. I said, well, great, more curlers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it brings more people out, most of those people came out and realized it was a lot harder than they thought. It's just interesting. I mean, you look at other Olympic sports. I mean, Nordic combined suddenly got medals this year for the United States. I see no chance of those medals translating into huge participation numbers. So I think you get the participation up, and I think developmental things should probably supersede selection issues. But I do agree with you that we need to look at a new selection process that tightens up who can get into it. I don't know if it would have made a huge difference this year. I mean, I think our talent pool is in the United States. It still needs to get a lot deeper. So, but I guess I'm encouraged to hear that we're not immediately moving towards let's select 5 guys and 5 women and say they're our team.
No, there's no knee-jerk reaction, and like I said, this has been in development for a while already. I think it's sort of the foundation is a model of, what does a world-class curler look like, and what are the 5 or 6 areas they need to focus on, from, fitness, mental skills, strategy, sweeping, different areas like that, and then develop a pool. I mean, this is a key thing, is the development side of athlete curlers that will have those attributes, and then will grow into world-class curlers. And fencing is a good example. Maybe 10 years ago, again, they had really nothing in terms of international success. They really focused on their grassroots and developmental side as creating an athlete pipeline, and they're successful regularly now on the world stage.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's something we were just discussing as we got on the phone. As I started, my club had an open house. We had 600-plus people through. We had people waiting 3 hours to throw 1 rock the length of the ice. Clearly, I happen to live in an area where 9 million people are within a reasonable drive of the club. I tend to think part of our developmental problem is a facilities problem. We need to get some clubs built in places where people live, especially large populations. And I don't know how we get over that hurdle.
That's a sticky one, and it is, it's true, the largest growth right now has been in arena curling, which we know isn't going to provide the best curling facility for competitiveness. And those are things we're all looking at now. That becomes a resource issue, but we might end up looking at 2 or 3 national training centers that provide year-round training facilities for people around the country. Again, that takes resources. So bottom line, it's always going to come back to funding and hopefully more sponsorship.
Well, I have a location idea for one of those centers here in the tri-state area, but we can talk about that at another time. It's interesting you talk about year-round curling. One thing that I found interesting with our team's training, and I guess I'm going to tweak the coaches a bit here, but, they were throwing rocks all summer, and I know enough about how, they were throwing rocks in Green Bay. They were over in Europe practicing during the summer. And because I know a fair amount through working with John Morris, I know a fair amount of Team Martin trained it. They didn't throw rocks all summer. In fact, John said even when the ice was in the Saville Center in July, they weren't throwing rocks. They were in the gym. And I guess when I was watching the training unfold over the summer, I was wondering why the coaches were there and not doing that off-season training.
Well, actually, that sort of off-season training was happening. We had our training center in Green Bay. The curling club was set up throughout the year. We also had a fitness center we were working with and partnering with there. We were partnering with the Green Bay Packers in the sense of trying to surround ourselves with excellence and motivation. A lot of the things that were being done on ice were more systems-based and different technical aspects of, say, delivery or sweeping and drills that they could work on that were conditioning as well as technique.
What would you think in the future if we got down to a pool of say, 4 teams that became our Olympic trials team, and then they played down in a trials format? And would you want them to be, if you had that group and they were all sort of these carded athletes, which they have in Canada, but they were a group of carded athletes, would you want to see the winner out of that group come a year in advance of the Olympics or go closer to the games?
Well, again, those are things all being discussed. We looked at an idea of having the nationals or a pre-trial a year out, and the winner would have an advantage and perhaps go to the World Championships that year, but maybe the top 4 teams go into an actual trial in December, so that the winner doesn't feel complacent, and I don't think our teams did this year, but it definitely puts a little more pressure on to be working and knowing that nothing's guaranteed yet.
Right.
And then you also have 3 other teams that are developing alongside them, so that could raise the program up overall too.
I would like to know more. I spoke to Simon Struben from Ralph Stokely's team last October, and their system sounds interesting. I don't know a ton about it, but I mean, they were basically played that best 4 to 7 series in October to decide who the Olympic team was, and if they hadn't fared well at the Europeans, I think they might have actually not gone to the Olympics still. But I think their system is worth reviewing just because they have similar numbers of curlers. Of course, they've got a lot of gold bullion in the back too, which makes a difference. But it's certainly one that I think we need to look at.
Yeah, we've been looking at a lot of the different programs out there. In Switzerland, they always seem to be around the middle in all the Olympics that I've been to anyway. Sweden has very strong programs. I think we have to find, as you said earlier, sort of a hybrid and what works for us. We're kind of an in-betweener. We're
Right.
about the size of Great Britain as far as number of curlers. And then your Swedens and Norway, they have maybe a few hundred. So the same athletes are always going to the international championships.
Right. And, Sweden and Norway really have seen no growth in the game, despite their success. I would say the UK as well really hasn't seen growth, despite some good success. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll get there. Hey, look, I'm sorry, I guess, in some regards for jumping all over you in that article. But when I did a Wall Street Journal webcast, and I appreciate you clearing up some of this stuff. I doubt we're on the same page with everything, but I think it's good to get out there and talk about it. So, hey, John Schuster's rink, as most of us know, also pulled out of the U.S. National Championship. It gets underway this weekend in beautiful Kalamazoo, Michigan. I urge anyone in the Midwest to get out there and attend. Were you very surprised, mildly surprised, or not surprised at all when they decided not to play?
Oh, somewhat surprised, I guess. But there was a lot of emotional and physical fatigue from the Olympics, and I know that some of the guys wanted to play, and some just felt like they wouldn't be able to do their best. So it was a decision then of the team to say, well, if we can't go there and do our best, then let's not do it.
All right. You're heading to Kalamazoo for the Nationals right now, driving through the beautiful Midwest. 6.5 hours, glamorous travel. I think it will be a great week. I know, of course, I know Kalamazoo. I lived there for 8 years. They're going to do their best to put on a good effort. Hey, we finished with the run back, Rick. I give you a topic, a little lighter ones, and you give me your thoughts on them in 1 to 3 words.
I'll do my best.
The torch malfunction at the opening ceremonies.
A shame.
I like how they rallied in the closing, though. Those very warm-looking U.S. opening ceremony outfits.
It was an indoor ceremony.
Yeah, I know, and they looked like Ralph Lauren had dressed them for Lillehammer outdoors or something. William Shatner's performance.
I didn't get to see it.
Oh, didn't see it. Canada's Own the Podium initiative.
They accomplished most of their objectives.
Those red mittens.
hot sellers.
And finally, where are you going? Kalamazoo, Michigan.
It's a great city that's embracing curling.
There's another good spot for Curling Center of Excellence, by the way. I'll put in that plug for them right now. Hey, Rick, thanks for your time. I'll see you this week, and I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion.
Thanks, Dean. Good luck at the Nationals.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That's Rick Patzke on The Curling Show. Remember that your training for next curling season should start now. So pick up a copy of Fit to Curl by Olympic gold medalist John Morris at fittocurl.com. As always, thanks for listening. Enjoy some pudding.
Don't you know it's hard for me to see things that I cannot find? How can I tell if it's a dream or just all in my mind?